PN selling Casini would be a mistake, Franco de Bono says. Slave remains found in a Zaytun church's secret corridor, and the Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation is nominated for a European prize. All this and more on another episode of Lovin Daily. Good evening, Malta and Gozo. Welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. I'm Matt, joined by Gianluca. Thank you for tuning in on yet another sticky, humid spring day. We're going to kick straight away off into our first story. PN leader Bernard Greg's proposal to sell off PN party clubs, aka Casini, to help reduce the party's €36 million debt will be a major mistake. Lawyer and former PN MP Franco de Bono has warned. Quote, Casini have been sold in recent years and the issue has not been resolved because debt has increased. Selling Casini will not be a solution but a mistake. De Bono wrote on social media, adamant that selling band clubs is not the answer. He continued, when the party recovers and realizes it has destroyed its own presence in towns and villages, it will be a tragedy. The solution needs to be creative and clubs, TV stations and every other resource needs to be used smartly. It is not getting rid of them at a discount. Bernard Grec revealed that the party would be willing to sell off its party clubs and commercialize them to address its massive debt issues, which leader has warned is preventing the party from growing in the long term. Grec is currently seeking support from PN Council members as he seeks a fresh mandate to lead the party after a somewhat dismal general election performance.
In fact, Franco de Bono has been quite outspoken on many issues in the past, as far as politics goes. In truth, I don't know how many locals would receive the fact that their Casinis are not there anymore in their local respective towns, but at the same time, it remains to be seen. At the same time, he remains quite an outspoken candidate in the PN, and it was even touted as a potential leader of the party. But it remains to be seen. Moving on to our next story, secrets of skeletons inside St. Gregory's Church in Zaytun are slowly being revealed. The picturesque little church in Zaytun houses a dark secret, which is a U-shaped passage which was discovered in 1969, housing the bones of 92 skeletons. Major questions arose about the origins of the skeletons, and now a new study has found at least 5 skeletons belonging to women of African origin who were probably slaves who served noble families at the time. In Malta at the time, female slaves would often live in the same home as their owners and were often baptized and even registered as local parishioners in their village. These studies poured cold water over some legends surrounding their origins, many of which were conflicting, and we're not even sure which one is true.
Yeah, this is certainly an interesting look back, I think, into Malta's past, and raises perhaps some uncomfortable questions about our own historical relationship with slavery. We'd love to hear a bit more about you guys, about the church, and tell us, have you ever visited? Let us know in the comment section. Moving on to our next story, the Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation has been nominated for the European Citizens Prize. The prize was launched by the European Parliament in 2008 in recognition of initiatives that contribute to European cooperation and the promotion of common values, including EU values and fundamental rights. The Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation has been on the front line against state corruption, PN MEP David Kaza said, who nominated the foundation on behalf of the EPP for promoting the core rights enshrined in the Charter on Fundamental Freedoms through awareness raising, capacity building and litigation aimed at instituting change. On the foundation, Kaza said, its work in securing access to information and realizing fundamental rights through advocacy for better governance has been unparalleled and necessary. Kaza praised the foundation for being, quote, a trailblazer for civil society in a period of Maltese history during which civil society played a vital role. The Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation was founded by the founder of Daphne Caruana Galizia after she was assassinated by a car bomb on the 16th of October 2017. It was set up to ensure justice was served for her murder, to safeguard her work and to strengthen civil society and the media. The Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation is responsible for the Public Interest Litigation Network, the PILN, Malta's first ever access to justice initiative, which is composed of lawyers, law firms offering legal representation to victims of discrimination, human rights violations, abuse of power, and state collusion in criminal activity. Also, the Malta Investigative Journalist Centre, which is a new initiative to train and equip independent journalists with the tools to investigate public interest stories.
In fact, the public inquiry into her assassination, into Daphne's assassination, was the first of its kind, one of the first of its kind in Malta that found her assassination was both predictable and preventable. And that the Maltese state must shoulder the responsibility for creating a culture of impunity that enabled her assassination. Moving on to our fourth story, good news to many, including many of our generation, Matt. We have an iconic childhood magazine, Sata. I'm sure many of our viewers remember this. It's now taken a digital leap by way of a new app with some neat new features in it. This was only made possible by way of a €20,000 injection from the voluntary organization commissioner, which now made the feature accessible by way of a mobile phone. To many, Sata is synonymous with Maltese childhood, with publications dating back since 1971. To date, after 51 years, it has released over 370 publications, and now it will have some neat new features in which you can listen to it by way of an audiobook and follow it by reading at the same time. Do you remember Sata?
I certainly do, and if anything, the story has made me realize I'm really getting old, so shout out to everyone who's going to complain that we're not actually that old. But on that very happy note, moving on to our final story of the day. An iconic Baldacchino townhouse has just had its 1960s modernist architecture saved, as the planning authority just approved designs that do not alter the original facade of the house. This came after discussions between the planning authority, the superintendents for cultural heritage, and the applicant of said permit, where new plans were submitted for reassessment by the Development Management Directorate, keeping the architectural value of the house in mind, which is, very nice to hear. Although the building in question is not a scheduled building, the property's facade is said to have a degree of architectural value. Quote, in line with recommendations made by the Superintendents of Cultural Heritage, the newly approved permissions will ensure that the facade of Walmartville, which is a distinctive 1960s building, will be retained, the planning authority said. The additional 2 floors that will be added to the double-fronted townhouse will retain the same design features, including apertures and railings, as the original facade. The only catch in this case is that apart from 2 extra levels, the townhouse is also set to have a penthouse constructed overhead. Earlier last year, development permission was granted for the property to be entirely demolished and replaced by a new building. The Superintendent for Cultural Heritage since appealed the decision and urged for new plans to be submitted so that the 1960s facade can be conserved. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Don't forget that we have just launched the next part of the Epic Foodie competition, wherein we'll be announcing the 4 finalists over the next few days, so be sure to keep your eyes peeled for more exciting updates on that front. Until then, this has been Matt and Gianluca, and have an evening full of lovin'.